Hi everyone. Today I'm going to chat to Gareth. He's a host of Endless Possibilities podcast, and just like myself, he's chatting to all sorts of people from different walks of life and backgrounds about spirituality and awakening and how fascinating this whole journey of a discovery of who we truly are is. And he's also author of a book, Waking Up from a Dream, an extraordinary journey of one man's spiritual awakening. Hi, Gareth.
Maggie, hello, how are you? Thank you for having me on your show. I'm very happy to be here today to have this conversation.
It's so good to see you. Like I've been watching your podcast on and off for quite some time. And I think I said in my email that there were two conversations in particular, the last two conversations with Jack O'Keefe and Dr. Karen Thurston. I hope I
Yeah,
didn't
Thorson, yeah, Karen Thorson, yeah.
yeah. And I was just like a kid, like I enjoy them the most. And I really resonated with the things that they both were talking about. And I also really enjoyed listening to the bits of your journey because it's been kind of unfolding in a very interesting way. And so I was also like, it was really just nice to hear where you're at this point.
Right, yeah.
And so I was thinking that maybe we could start from you sharing a sort of condensed version of your journey, and if there are if there are conversations on different channels where you share your
Yeah.
journey more in depth, then I am more than happy to include the links in the description in case someone wants to go and watch those.
Yeah, so I've spoke about my story a number of times, and yeah, so I'll get to it, right?
Yeah.
Uh, very, very early stage of my life, a feeling of not belonging, feeling like I was born into a strange family, even though I had very good parents. It was just kind of like, what is going on here? I don't understand any of this. Um, a very rebellious streak in me as a child and a teenager, and also as I kind of got a little bit older, I guess a fear of death um around like what am I doing all this for if I just die and that's it, it's all over. So that was always in the back of my mind. Fast forward to around 2005, I was going on a vacation. Somebody gave me, I was actually with a girlfriend at the time, and I was bored on the plane, and she gave me a book by Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. And I just started devouring it. I was just like, wow, I couldn't believe all the concepts and the ideas. They were totally new to me. And I just jumped straight in, started practicing affirmations, started working on myself, started doing inner child work. Um, and I guess you would call it manifestation, right? So I got really into all of this and started just straight away, my life started changing, started attracting more prosperity, better relationships into my life. My confidence started to grow. And I was like, wow, there's something to this. I don't know what it is, but there seems to be like a law in the universe, and if I send out a message, it answers me. Um, so I made my life better, right? Or you could say I put more cushions and fancy curtains in the dream. I was still in a prison cell. I was still, totally identified as my mind and my body. Um, so yeah, so I had a good time creating, manifesting a better life for myself, and then kind of got bored with it. Then went down the whole rabbit hole of out of body experiences around 2010, 2011. Started having spontaneous out of body, leaving my body, astral traveling, lucid dreams, lots of tests. Um, Started coming in these sort of weird lucid dreams. I would find myself in classrooms, fear tests, all this kind of stuff going on for about 2 years. And again, a really great time doing it all. It was very exciting. I felt very special. Um, I felt like I was one in a, one in a billion people who could do
Mm-hmm.
this. And
Mm-hmm.
the universe must have, really favored me, right? But again, absolutely no quality of consciousness. I was still me. I was still had an ego. Um, and then I got an illness. An illness came along and it really, really flattened me for 2 or 3, about 2 years. Like I was really bad with the illness. And it was like as if it nearly just broke me. It was like it even sucked the energy from the ego. So the ego diminished quite a lot during the
Mm-hmm.
sickness. And it stripped everything I had a business for 15 years. I was really involved in fitness. And it just stripped all of that away from me. My identity. I was like, just wasting away in a bed. Um, Eventually got over the illness. I was always meditating, but never really seen myself as a spiritual seeker. Didn't know anything about enlightenment until I discovered Eckhart Tolle, and I started listening to his audiobook, The Power of Now. And I was like, wow, so I've had all of these spiritual or paranormal activities
Mm-hmm.
going on, but I've overlooked the present moment. How, and I was like, how did I do that? And straight away, I started witnessing. So I was really good at meditating. I had a very quiet mind from the years of meditation, and straight away, I was really anchored in the present moment. But also realized that I had to consciously do it. Right? If I put a foot wrong, I would like, start thinking about the future. It was almost like I was walking on a tight rope, balancing. Like I had to really stay balanced and centered to be in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I was witnessing, right? I was out of my mind. I was kind of something started opening up, like a portal, another dimension. And it wasn't that there was anything different to what anybody else was seeing, but it was just it just seemed like the colors were more vibrant, the mind was quieter. I was actually seeing things for the first time without the mind labeling everything, and it was beautiful. It was really, really amazing. um about I was witnessing for probably about a year without even knowing really what witnessing was or spiritual awakening. And I think I picked up a book uh, by Robert Adams and started kind of I just reading. It was on my phone. It was on like a Kindle or something like that, and just reading it. And it was all about self-realization and that kind of stuff. But I didn't understand what it was. And a few days later, I got up one morning to go into the gym, went in and kind of had this weird feeling that I was being watched. Like there was something watching me. There was something communicating with me through music, through sounds. It kind of felt like, I don't know, a very strange feeling. And for a moment, I just stopped and I looked out the window and there was beautiful sun coming in. It was about like 7 a.m. or 7:30. And I was like, wow, that sun is not outside of me. I said, that's actually in my consciousness. I said, it's inside. And I said, the music and the noises, they're not external. I said, that's inside of me. And as soon as I said that, there was like a rush of reality, and it felt like two pieces of Velcro just ripped inside my mind. And it was like something literally just woke up and became lucid. And funny, I just go back to the outer body and the lucid dreaming. It was almost like they were really important because if anybody's ever had a lucid dream, right, any of your viewers and listeners, they there's an understanding that when you wake up in the dream, you know that your body is actually in the bed and you've fallen asleep and you're actually in a dream reality. And you're like you're looking around and you actually know you're in a dream. Well, this was something greater than me. The character of Gareth was, outside of my world, had fallen asleep, dreamt itself into me, and was living my life. endlessly waking up day after day, believing the story of who I was, with the business, with the money worries, trying to balance, all these different things. And it was just an ongoing dream within a dream, right? And it was like as if it was God, it was God or the universe. I don't know how, like I don't really have any reference for God, but it felt like it was God. God just woke up in me and looked out through my eyes, and I knew what I was. I knew I wasn't me, that I was just a greater intelligence, supreme being, whatever you want to call it. And then I started to look around and I started to understand that I was also that which was creating everything. So I was the walls, I was the music, the sun. I was somehow making all of this for me to come into the experience and to have it. And I was also the other people. So I was looking at the other people and I instantly knew that I had fallen asleep, dreamt myself into this character, Gareth, and just woke up and was peering out through the eyes of this one. But I was also dreaming myself into all of the other individuals, but I was still asleep in them. And that was it. That was like it. That was the first awakening. I woke up the next day. It didn't stay like that. The realization of God peering out through my eyes closed down. The next day I woke up, I was different. There was a sense of unbounded freedom that was just, it felt like it was internal. Something had just like snapped away from my human, and there was just spacious awareness that was somehow aware of itself. When I would speak, it felt like the words were coming from, they weren't no longer coming from Garrett's mind, but they were just coming out of my mouth. And I was like, what is that? And I had no reference for it whatsoever. I was just like, this feels amazing. For the next couple of months, I just sat on the sofa, really enjoying. I don't need to do anything. I don't think I ever even went back to the gym, maybe once afterwards. And just started really enjoying what this was. I was no longer rushing around trying to, control my reality. There was just freedom, and that was it. That was the start of me as a spiritual seeker. I had gotten a taste for it, and I now wanted more. So I needed to understand it. So the first teacher I came across was Adyashanti, The End of Your World, his book.
Oh,
Absolutely loved it. I loved him. Had a such an amazing time listening to him speak about all the different stages of awakening, and I was starting to kind of piece together what was going on for me.
every time I hear his name, it's like he played such an important
Yeah.
role in my journey as well, and especially this book. If I had read this book after my first awakening, it would have made such a big impact because after my first awakening, I went into like sort of equanimity that lasted for about 3 years. And then I plunged back into suffering like I never knew,
Wow.
but I had zero frame of reference. First of all, I would have never called that thing that happened an awakening because I was not a spiritual seeker. I did not even consider myself a spiritual person at all. So I had zero frame of reference, but I clearly had woken up to a completely different way of seeing reality and myself. And like I said, went into this period of equanimity and then plunged back into suffering and on and off. Like we're talking something like nearly 10 years of on and off dark night and not having a clue, staring at the abyss, existential terror, and all sorts of things. But like I said, on and off.
Mm.
And a lot of my suffering at the time had to do with the fact that I couldn't understand, Gareth, how I could have suffered this much after having that kind of profound what I would call a shift at the time. So this
Hmm.
is why, when I hear about Adia and the book The End of Your World, like I just know, I mean, it worked out the way it worked out, you know what I mean? So it's
Sure.
it's fine. But but I know that when I eventually read that book, the first thing I thought, like, boy, if I read that book at that point, I'm not saying that it would have spared me from suffering. It doesn't, I'm not saying that it would have spared me from the things that I had to go through anyway, but at least I would, like, at least it would give me some kind of like reference that this is like, this is what people go through and that this is normal and I'm not actually going crazy. Even though I've met so many teachers in between and I'm so aware of so many teachers and read so many books, Adya remains consistently at the top
I
of the teachers
agree.
I look up to, so yeah. So
Yeah,
anyway, go
I
ahead.
totally agree. If I was to have a gold standard of what a teacher should look like, it would be Adyashanti.
Yeah.
I just totally fell in love with him as a being and the way he would describe the states and his just lovely nature. So yeah, totally. I devoured all his books when I was going through my awakening, and I mean, in one sense, such a soft-spoken, gentle natured individual, but I also seen him as like a samurai warrior who was like dismantling me with a sword, day after day, chopping pieces of my ego down. I'd be going to work with Adia playing on my, on my earphones, and I would just feel chunks of me like going out the window, and it was painful. But I have to say, after my awakening, there was, for me, fear was gone. Just all, like, when I say fear, it was sort of like intellectual fear was just gone. It was just never in my system anymore after that awakening. Um, so my awakening was a bit different. So I didn't really have much suffering when I went through the awakening process. It was just an awful lot of like blissful states of oneness. I get into that now, right? So for 2 years, I didn't really have anybody to talk to, like friends or a network around me. Apart from one friend, and he had been traveling and he came back from the United States, and we went to a couple of satsangs, and I got to meet a few. I actually went to see Adyashanti when he was in Dublin. Pamela Wilson. There was a few teachers who came by, and I would listen to them. Um, but it was really just about me being, getting to know them stages, and very quickly, like literally weeks after the first shift, I started noticing that there was an aperture opening up and closing down nearly on a daily basis when I would leave the house and go for walks. And it was like the awareness that had woke up in me was now looking out through my eyes and seeing itself in nature. So I would see myself in the trees, the clouds, um, the wind moving things. I could see that I was all of this, but it wasn't a permanent state. It would close down. Um, and this was beautiful. This was really, really beautiful. It was like a heart opening, a lot of like tears when I'd be going for walks. And it felt like I was like an alien. I always used to have this sense of like I had a, a craft had come along and dropped me down to witness Earth for the first time. And it was like every step was the first step that I ever took. Every sight that I'd seen, the way the sun would come through the leaves and through the little drops of water on the leaves. I was seeing that for the first time ever. Everything was new, everything was vibrant, fresh. And yeah, going through Adyashanti's book, this was sort of like what the TMers would call God consciousness, the God consciousness phase, where consciousness is seeing itself, but not a permanent
Hmm.
stage. After about 2 years, intuitively, I just felt that there was something energetically that had to work its way out, and I started researching Kundalini awakening. Just, I don't know, I just seen the word one day, and I was like, oh, and went down that rabbit hole. and went and received a transmission called Shaktipat from a teacher. Um,
In Dublin?
in Dublin, yeah, a
Hmm.
Danish teacher, Jan Esman, um, who I thought was like a total rogue. Like he was like the opposite of what an enlightened being, I thought should be. And I really liked him, and I still do really like him. He's a great guy, but just very different from, say, Adyashanti, right? Just polar opposites. Um, so received Shaktipat from Jan, and after it was like a 3 day intensive, and after the intensive, I went into states of ecstatic bliss. I had no clue that this could even happen. Um, I felt like I had somehow taken some sort of like drug and I was intoxicated, and it went on for about 3 months. Never experienced anything like it
This
in
is
my
so
entire.
unfair. I mean, I'm so sorry, but like, this is so unfair.
Yeah,
You know,
sorry.
that I had to go through this hell and you've been floating on the blissful cushions, and for
Yeah,
3, I'm kidding. But it is fascinating. That's another bit that I love about these conversations, like how different our journeys are. So I just love this.
they're so different. They really are. And I work with lots of people, and I hear, I speak to people. They're all different. Every single person has a unique journey. For some reason, I think all of this was really important for me because I don't think I would have, like, the out of body experiences, the lucid dreams. I needed flashiness. I needed a real slap in the face. I needed to follow that that path of like, oh, there's a blissful state that I want to get to. And it really kind of made me want to go further in the stages of awakening. I was like, wow, if I got this taste, I want more of this. So there was definitely still like a wanting something, a wanting bliss, a chasing after it, because I did this, I had 3 months of bliss, and then all of a sudden the bliss started to taper off. And I was like, where's it gone? Oh my God, this is terrible. Um, and found myself booking a flight to go on another retreat to Copenhagen. Went on a second retreat, received Shaktipat, thought I was going to be back in the bliss state, got home, didn't really have the bliss again. And I was like, well, I wonder what's happened there. But 2 weeks later, experienced a full Kundalini awakening. So I lay down on the bed, energy started moving up and down my spine, and eventually made its way up into the brain. And it felt like my whole crown opened up to the universe. It was really beautiful, blissful experience. I don't know how long it lasted, 3 or 4 hours. Um, Woke up the next day and just, I was now different. There was a kind of a different quality to my beingness when I would meditate. There was like a different texture. When I would close my eyes, consciousness wasn't flat anymore. It was sort of like it had richness. It would, I could almost see um, that there was Shakti in consciousness. Like there was an aliveness in everything. There was an aliveness in everything that I would see now. Um, yeah, but again, I knew that there was more. I was like, right, I will have to keep going. This isn't it. There's more.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, absolutely.
Was this a no, was this just sort of an intuitive knowing that there was more and you had to keep going? And if or did it show up as something else, like restlessness or some kind of like inner dissatisfaction or whatever? What was that?
No, no. I was still having I was still like, I could have stayed where I was. It was really, really nice. There was nothing really lacking. But I knew there were certain individuals that I had to find, locate, go see. Almost like I kind of felt like a bee going from flower to flower, collecting pollen. I knew there were certain
Yeah.
individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah. So then I came across another teacher. who was doing a silent retreat in Ireland. I went to do a retreat with him, and a little bit different. There was a transmission. Everything was done in silence, but it was very, very different from the Shaktipat experience. I I was like, okay, nice, nice retreat. But when I left there, something changed. I now had this descending force coming in. And what you mentioned earlier, equanimity started in my system. So I was like, oh, and I started going into states of samadhi. So I would find myself, sitting down and feeling this descending energy coming in through the top of my head. And it was like something was now meditating me. It wasn't Garrett trying to find something or get into a certain state. Now it was like the divine was coming after me. It was like I was running after it, and then it turned around and started running after me. And it was like, oh my God, what is happening? So it was like, it became rapturous. For some reason, it was having its way with me. It would come in and I would go into these stage. I didn't know what they were at the time. I didn't know what samadhi was. And I later discovered that there was two types of samadhi that I was having. Nirvikalpa samadhi, where I would just completely disappear. I would, feel the energy and I'd just be gone. And I would wake up like 90 minutes later, no recollection of what happened. Time seemed to have just stopped. And then I would have Savakalpa Samadhi, where it would take me, but my awareness would stay, and I would be able to hear noises. I would be able to think, but I was
Mm-hmm.
in complete absorption.
Mm-hmm.
And that went on for about 3 or 4 months. And then one evening, I sat to meditate, I closed my eyes, and all of a sudden, I was faced with like terror, absolute nothingness. It was like I stepped in front of a juggernaut, right? Like a truck, and I was just about to be destroyed. But it was like a black abyss, nothingness. I can't describe it, but I knew that I had to go into it. And it felt like I was going to be swallowed up and I wasn't ever going to come back. And it wasn't even that I was going to die. It felt like somehow I was going to be erased from the server. There would just be no me, no memory of anything. But I knew I had to go in, and I kind of just took that leap of faith into it and disappeared. Almost felt this like terror in my stomach, in my gut, and in my heart
Mm-hmm.
just as I entered it, and I was gone. And I don't know how long I was gone for. I think like 90 minutes or so. And then something, awareness started to come back, and it was like, okay, I have to come back into a body. Started coming back into the body, started realizing what had just happened. And then there was this churning fear. Oh my God, I never want that to happen again. Whatever that was, I don't want that. It was like, again, I had no framework for it, but it was like, I don't know. It seemed to be the opposite of what I imagined God to be. It was just nothingness, void. And I was like, okay, I don't want that to ever happen again. So the next day, I went to meditate again, and I sat and I just felt this another pull, right? It was like, oh, it's been taken again, but this time like a blue circle or a blue dot appeared right in front of me, and I got pulled into this blueness. But I stayed, my awareness stayed this time, and it was like as if I merged with this ocean. It seemed like a beautiful ocean of sparkling cyan blue intelligence. It was pure love, pure potential. And if to me, it felt like I kind of somehow knew it was Krishna, right? I didn't really know what Krishna was, but in my head, I was like, the being Krishna with the beautiful blue skin and the eyes, he is somehow a representation of what this reality is. Um, and I could feel it. There was like an energetic like signature. I was like, this is what Krishna is, but it wasn't. It was like it wasn't like a God with a personality, but somehow it was the mind of God. And I somehow merged with this, became it. It was like I was part of it, and I could still have my understanding. Um, and it was the most incredible thing I ever experienced. I was like, I never want to come out of this. And somehow I was able to have a reference for me in the bed meditating. And then I was like, how is that possible that there is an individual who's in creation who's actually who thinks he's going through an awakening or had gone through, self-realization or God consciousness. And the whole thing just seemed laughable that there was a human who was having an awakening because
Mm-hmm.
all there was this mind of God. So came out of this experience, I don't know, like again, probably lasted for about an hour, or a little bit over an hour. Um, but I somehow knew still there was more. There was more to come. A couple of weeks later, I was sat meditating in bed and I think I was reading David Buckland, who you had on recently. I was reading his book, Our Natural Potential, and David Buckland
Yeah.
was talking about unity consciousness. And I had been reading David Buckland's book actually, and I was able to look at the stages he was talking about, and I was going, okay, witnessing, I've done that, self-realization, yes, God consciousness, yes. And then I got to unity consciousness, and I was like, that's not my experience. I'm not having that. And I kind of knew that that hadn't happened for me at that stage. Um, and then I started meditating one morning and I inquired about unity. I was like, what, am I close? Is it happening? Um, can you show me what it is? And this was something that I was really gifted with when I was going through my awakening. When I would meditate, I could ask questions and I would get very detailed answers. Like images would form in front of my eyes. There was like an intelligence, telepathic, not a voice, but just a knowing would come in. And I was meditating, and all of a sudden, I seen a coffee mug, and I was like, "Oh, the coffee mug is the container that houses my consciousness." And then I saw prison bars, and I was like, "And the prison bars is me being, imprisoned by the container." And then all of a sudden, the coffee mug was tapped against the prison bars, and it went one, two, and on the third tap, the coffee mug shattered. And there was an explosion of white light in my mind that went out into the universe, right? It felt like it went to the four corners of the universe. Everything became white, bright. Everything went really, really quiet. And I was like, oh my God. I was like, what has happened? And then all of a sudden it imploded back in. So it came back into my head, back in to the center of my brain, and everything just became still, like really, really still, quiet. And I was like, okay, wow. I kind of knew what it was. I'd been reading about it. The container shattered, right? The consciousness now had gone beyond the limitations of the body. Subject, object had somehow collapsed in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it was unity consciousness. So, yeah, sat there 2 hours, total stillness, never experienced stillness like this before in my life. Um, Thoughts just really became non-existent. But yeah, the alarm clock went off. I had to get up. I had to go about my day. And there was definitely a shift, but within 2 weeks of the shift, it was became very normal. It really like it was like, did that even happen? But now there was a sense that I was spilling out into my surroundings. And it was a weird feeling. Um, the way I would describe it best was I always had this kind of sense of being at home and being safe, sat on my sofa. My home was always my safe space. And now all of a sudden, it felt like I was home no matter where I was. So I could be in the middle of a busy street in a city and everything felt like home. It was like, okay, I can just sit here. This feels totally safe. Feel like I'm one with everything. and somehow felt like I had now become everything. Not like I was in the mind. People ask me this all the time. Not like I'm in everybody having an experience of
Mm-hmm.
them, but somehow I had this panoramic feeling where my awareness was no longer defined by the edges of my body and it went outwards and was inclusive of everything. And I was like, oh, I'm all of this. This is all me. Um, Within a couple of weeks, I was meditating again. I think I was on a retreat, meditating, and all of a sudden, I noticed my awareness dropped down into my heart. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at the top of my heart, and it looked like there was like a little chimney that was protruding on the top of the heart. And all of a sudden, I could see this little creature, like a whack-a-mole, like a little it was alive, it had its own beingness, and it was poking its head up. And I was looking at it, and I somehow knew that that was my eye. It was like the condensed eye. And I somehow knew that there had been a conduit that was going from my heart up into my mind. And this little creature was using that conduit to jump up into my mind. It was my eye, it was the eye thought. And somehow the conduit had been removed. I don't know when it was removed. I don't know, but I was somehow been shown what had happened. The conduit was removed, and then this eye was trying to jump. It had nowhere to go, and it fell back into the heart, and it dissolved. And from that moment on, the 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 density that was at the center of me, and this was kind of how I was sensing it, right? Because I had memories of prior someone being hurtful to me, right? Saying something nasty and feeling almost like a knife going into my heart, like something solid there. And now all of a sudden that was gone. There was just it was like emptiness in my chest. Not emptiness, coldness, but it was like stuff was just passing through. Like the barn doors were open and the breeze could just pass through it without hitting anything. And I noticed that now I was now in a permanent state of samadhi. I was like, okay, I woke up and it felt like meditation. I didn't need to meditate anymore. It was like I had become meditation, sitting and closing my eyes and going into the meditative state. It wasn't needed anymore. Then all of a sudden, I think I was reading David Buckland's book again. He started talking about Brahman, and I was like, okay, that's strange. I didn't really have a context for it, but I started remembering to the shift where I had this experience of facing that abyss. And I was like, I think that's happened to me. And because I was reading David's book and it seemed to be linear, right? He was talking about these stages and he had Brahman after Unity. So I couldn't really get my head around like the fact that I somehow had that Brahman experience before Unity. And I was like, okay. So I started trying to understand Brahman, right? And I started having an intellectual understanding. And when I started having the intellectual understanding, it was almost like the experience and the understanding kind of merged and the shift happened. So I was meditating again. I had my eyes closed, and all of a sudden I saw Shiva sat on like a mountaintop. And Shiva then said, "You and Shiva, or you, Shiva and I are now one," or something like that. And I was different. I was like, okay, I couldn't describe it, but it felt like everything I was now looking at was being displayed on a screen of nothingness. I kind of had the sense that if I went to the edges and I peeled back, if I was able to look behind a curtain, I knew that everything was now somehow displayed on the canvas of that nothingness that I had gone into. Um, and that was Brahman. Also, I noticed that I had no sort of reference for anything. It was like family members, even my own children. It was like when I wasn't with them, I couldn't find them. I couldn't find them. I would have to like really think about my mum. I would go, God, I actually haven't even thought about my mum in 2 or 3 weeks. I better ring her, right? It was like everybody just disappeared unless they were right in
Did,
front of me. Go
did you
ahead.
find it in any way unsettling in your
Totally.
body, or in like where did, or rather, did you find it unsettling? And if you found it unsettling, where did that unsettled feeling, where was it located? I'm
Okay.
curious.
Okay. So yeah. So I definitely felt up to that point, everything had been amazing, right? All the beautiful experience. There was something having an experience, like even in unity consciousness, there was still a me going, I am one with everything. But now at this shift in Brahman, it was like everything crumbled. There was no center, there was no landing point. There was just reality appearing when I would look and when I would turn away, crumbling. And it was like there was a sense of like I had broken the human.
The
Like
person, the
the person was
person.
gone.
Yeah,
There was
yeah.
no person. The humanness, Gareth the human, wasn't there, right? It just
Mm,
wasn't there. It was just, yes, if you talk to me, there's something that resembles Garrett. There's still the personality is still there. But it's like when I close my eyes, there's no human there. It's just
hmm.
like there was just an abyss inside of me, just this black nothingness. And I felt like I had fallen down a well and I was in this darkness. And somehow, if I looked up, that little circle of light was my life, and people would come over and they would try and talk to me. And it was like I would have to like climb up out of the well to kind of, interact, be human for a moment. And then I would fall back into the darkness. Um, and I had that for 2 years, Maggie. It
Oh
was
my
like,
God.
yeah,
two
and I
years?
2 years, all my bliss, all the love, all the human connection, all the Shakti that I was experiencing, it got sucked out by this nothingness. Um,
And did you experience fear?
it's not fear. There's no, you're not suffering. It's not like you're suffering, but it's like I don't know, what's the right word? It's like there's a distant memory of what human life used to be
Mm,
like. And it's like there was a connection when I was human. I had, fond memories of, you know, relationships and
yeah.
holidays and family time. And now all of a sudden that was gone. And it
Like
was
the
just like,
emotional charge that comes with those things. Yeah.
yeah, honestly, right? If I felt like I destroyed everything. And I'm like, I remember, and I was kind of teaching at the time, and I was having interactions with my Zoom group, and I remember one day or one evening talking on Zoom, and people were really everybody wanted to know about Brahman, right? For even it was just such a buzz. And I was fighting back the tears. I was like, like I could feel them, And I think that video is still on my YouTube somewhere. Like I was like, you don't want this, guys. You really don't, want this Brahman. It's nothing to be. There was no enjoyment in it. Yes, I wasn't suffering, but there was no love was gone, humanness was gone. I just felt like I was like I had somehow floated out. I floated out of the spaceship, and my connection, my air supply had been cut off, and I was just floating off away from everything, everybody I knew.
And isn't this amazing, like when you mention the tears? Because I think I experienced something similar, which I would describe as grieving the person being
Yeah,
gone.
yeah.
It still gets me actually.
Me too. Even when I'm talking about it.
And
Yeah.
even though things have very much settled and is, I can't say that there's like zero connection or anything, because even that has kind of settled, if that makes sense, at
Yes.
this point here. But so I was like, well, if there's nobody there, then like how can you be experiencing grief? But it's almost like I think this is what I was talking to Vivi, the last person I was talking to on my channel, which is like so many of us don't realize how much of that me is in the body. and it's like the body is grieving because
Yeah.
like the body is also getting used to this. And I remember like the first time, like even simplest things, like I remember New Year's, like New Year's Eve. And this would always be like the time when I would be like sitting and like sort of reflecting on what was. And like, I remember, first of all, I couldn't do it. I actually couldn't look back.
Yeah.
It was like everything was just gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, see, I get like my body is still kind of.
Yeah. It's a death. It's a death of something, a death of the human. Yeah.
And then there was this like moment and part of my favorite things to do was always like talking to either my partner or whoever, my friends, to like what you're gonna do like next year. So we would talk about like the plans and like the things that we would like to do next year. And I also I'm still very much Sagittarius rising, okay? So I don't know if you're into astrology, but like I'm still kind of like there's a lot of the personality traits of Sagittarius, and Sagittarius always loves to look forward to things and loves to like have things to look forward to. It's such a tr personality trait of Sagittarius. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting there and there's no look, I can't look forward to. You know what I mean? Like that mechanism of looking forward to something gone. And I remember sitting, it was like in a bar, and I was like looking around at people like laughing, and the grief was just overwhelming. I was like, that person that was looking forward to something, it was just not there. And it was like, okay, so that's gone. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So, and I know that it may sound kind of scary and freak some people out. It is grief, but like what's left is so alive, and so extraordinary ordinary as well that it's okay. Like it really is not it's not an issue, but my point is it's incredible. It's just something else. And I remember reading this book ages ago, something about enlightenment, and someone was saying if the spiritual seekers actually knew what they're signing up for, they would not ever sign up for it. Like no one would sign up for it by their conscious
Yeah.
choice. You know what I mean? So to speak.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's okay, but like these are the parts where like no one prepares you for this. Like I never heard people talk really about that, what that's like, you know. But I don't know, can I ask you something? Because
Absolutely.
it makes you kind of appreciate conditioning. Actually, people want to like wake out of conditioning, but actually you now see conditioning as this extraordinary, miraculous something that allows you to actually function.
Mm.
Because like I was telling someone an example of like going to my vegetable market where I go every week, and I talk to the same local people, and I love chatting with them about the weather, about whatever is going on in their lives. And I always am happy to see them, and they are happy to see me, and sort of. And one day I just go there, and they go, "How are you?" And I'm like, I just stared at them because I couldn't find I had to find
Yeah.
with all my might, or
Yeah.
cognitive wheels
Yeah.
spinning, because I had to find the me they were asking, "How are you?" And then I had to remember what that person is meant to say when asked, "How are you?" Okay. And this, and and they looked at me. I mean, it was like you could film a movie. If it would be like a comedy, because they look. I think we both held I held my breath, staring at them. They held their breath. Eventually, I was able to get to this something that was able to answer. And I'm like, I think I'm fine. And they were like, wow, that took a while. You know what I mean? Because like I think we kind of both were relieved that I finally came up with a simple answer to the how are you question.
Yeah. I felt like I had broke the human. I was like, I cannot get that back. It's gone. I felt, I was in despair. Something was in despair. There was a mourning, there was a loss, and it was through the body. I was 100% feeling it. Like everything changed. Like I don't go on about it, but like my was never the same after that.
Mm-hmm.
Even my relationship with my kids, I was different. Before I was
Mm,
like, before I would have things that I would enjoy doing. Like I would go kayaking, I would like go on
mm-hmm.
adventures, caravanning, camping, holidays. And then all of a sudden it was like, what's the
Mm-hmm.
point? Like what? Like everything is the same. Everything. If I sit here on the chair, it's the same as being in my kayak. There's no. I don't know. Just I felt the human was just gone. It really was. I had nobody that I could actually sit down and talk to about this. Um, but I don't want to make it sound like it's all doom and gloom.
I just wanted to say that like when you said 2 years, I was like, whoa, because I had like moments of that for a while. You know what I mean? There was like si bits and pieces of situations, but like 2 years of that, that's a lot, you know?
Yeah, so it's funny. It felt like I was somehow here and somehow I was partitioned outside of creation. So I was like here and I was almost like I was like Shiva, somehow just nothingness peering in on my life. And it was like it was very strange here and there and nothing at the same time. Um, but it started to warm up a little bit. So then all of a sudden I noticed that I started to feel this um shimmering energy started entering, right? But it wasn't, there was no click and I was gone out of Brahman, but it was like a very, very gradual over months. There was something entering my system. It felt like it was shimmering, glittery. If I could put a color on it, it would be platinum. And it was filling me up. It started coming in, down into my body, into the cells. And this was happening on a daily basis, like all day long. And I intuitively was doing exercises like pranayama and reciting mantras somehow
Mm-hmm.
because I knew that it was helping that energy come in, and I don't know, that was ongoing, and then I guess I wrote about it in my book. It's very hard for me to describe again. One evening, I took the kids. I had two boys. I have two boys. I took them to uh, the caravan. I had a caravan on a beach,
Mm-hmm.
and we were sitting in the caravan. I knew that something was happening, and I was like, I started getting a little bit worried. I was like, something is going to happen, and I kind of just sort of asked. I said, "Look, don't. I have the kids. Don't do it now." And it somehow it didn't happen. But the next day, I was home, I sat on the sofa, and I seen a vision of myself having a seizure. And I said, I need to get to my bed very quick. And as soon as I got onto the bed, I just started moving, shaking. And I was totally fine, but my body was doing all of this weird stuff. It was like, it looked like a seizure, I suppose. And all of this energy started rushing in, rushing in. And I knew, I was like, I'm gone. For whatever's happening, I'm not moving. I'm totally paralyzed until this does what it's supposed to do. It went on for hours. I was in this, I was totally exhausted. Eventually it kind of stopped. Kind of was in this, in and out of this sleep and a wakefulness and back and totally broken sleep all night. Woke up the next morning, sat up. I was like, I'm different. Something has happened. Later on that evening, sat to meditate again. I think I was doing a live stream on YouTube and closed my eyes, and my awareness just shot up into this purple reality. And I was like, oh, where am I? Right. And I looked around, and it looked like the zodiac symbols. It was like I was in a purple reality, and there was like zodiac symbols all the way around me in gold. And this message came in, and it was like, now take these gifts and bring them back to the world. And all the symbols came into me, and then I descended back down, and I heard the message birthday greetings like that. And I went, I don't know what that means. And soon as I finished the live stream meditation, somebody, an Indian friend of mine, texted me to say that today was Krishna's birthday. Um, and yeah, I don't know. I guess it was like para Brahman, what they call para Brahman, right? The soul had been pulled out of creation into the nothingness, into Brahman, merged with Brahman, became Brahman, and then had re-entered back down into creation and had now created a conduit for the divine forces to come in. And this was this like divine, pure divinity, descending, liquidy energy. And I was now seeing it in everything. It was like, again, I was seeing everything the same way I always seen it, but now everything had like a beautiful quality to it, like a holiness that I hadn't seen before. So I don't know, that was like 4 years ago. And to be honest with you, right, it never stopped. That whole filling up, the divinity coming in, that's still going on. It's still happening in my system. I still have
Oh,
energy
yeah.
entering on a daily occurrence, doing stuff in me. I can still feel it working stuff out. That was 4 years ago. I have been working kind of like as a teacher, doing retreats, had talked about all the stages over and over, wrote a book about it, taught, it was finished. Met with, I interviewed the two of them, Luciano and Rastal from the Perfectly Okay group. And they started talking about this. Uh, Actually, what I noticed was that all phenomena just kind of died down, and I started becoming really
Mm.
normal. Although I have this crazy energy all the time, everything became normal, like very normal, no visions, nothing paranormal, nothing out of the ordinary, very much just like having a very ordinary human experience back in the body, almost like, did anything even happen? Right? It's like, and this has been going on for quite some time, right? It's just like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, yeah, I have all the energy, but I'm totally human. No, I can't, no real psychic abilities, nothing, right? Just really human. And I met Luciano and Rastal, and they started talking about this. They're researchers in consciousness and the stages of awakening. And they came up with this, they coined this term called omni, which was beyond Brahman and beyond para Brahman. And it just seems to be that like everything just sort of collapses. It's just you're back as a human, but not the same. Not the
Yeah.
same. It's like you're just okay. Um, and that seemed to be what happened. But then I started to get this restlessness recently. Like, what am I doing? Everything I'm talking about seems to be like complete BS. People asking me about this, about Unity, about Kundalini, and it's like I just feel like the biggest imposter, biggest phony. Who am I? What am I doing talking about this? I don't have the authority to talk about anything. And I was even getting to the stage where it's like the whole teaching, the whole me, who am I to say that can talk about awakening? And I just had this I felt like packing the whole thing in. I was like, I'm done with it. I'm done talking to people. I'm an imposter. And it was a Saturday morning. This wasn't long ago. This is like, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago. And I just got up one morning. I think I made a video, and I kind of had a rant in the video. And that's very unlike me. And I kind of like put a big dampener on awakening for people. And after the video, I went for a walk and I just, it felt like another awakening had happened. It was like, I think we spoke just before we started recording. It was like I looked up and the clouds parted and the sun came through, and it was like another awakening. And it was like I had woke up from the whole dream of awakening, right? There was never any awakening. The whole thing was just made up somehow. And there was never anything that could have ever awakened because it was always awake. And the whole character crumbled, the whole story crumbled. And you know what? Like maybe the being a teacher was necessary to put me into that place, to put me to be talking about it.
One of the things that came through on my walk, which is funny that in both our cases this happened on a walk and sort of looking up, that like it was just so clear that in every moment nothing can be different to what it is. Therefore, there
Yeah.
can be no mistakes. So, but not as like intellectual understanding of that. It's just completely seeing that it couldn't have been any different to what it was, therefore, which is why it was perfect. And the only and actually it's always been sort of a synchronicity. If you take the overlay of the narratives about how things should be, everything there's only just what was and what is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally, totally. And it's not like this is something I've been talking about quite a lot with people, right? It's not like your life is now better, or it's like it's not like you're now totally free from any sort of like suffering in the world. Like all of that stuff is still happening. Your human is still like, even I feel it's even more, right? You feel things way more than you used to. Like
Yeah.
I've been going through something like my human, I call it my human. My human has like created the craziest story for itself at the moment. Like you couldn't write what my human has picked for itself. And it's like somehow I've knowingly just gone, okay, this could be a complete tragedy, but I'm still doing it. I'm still going through with it. Um, in the face of like everything been destroyed on me. And somehow I've found myself here, and it's the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced in my life, and the most painful thing my human has ever experienced. And I'm still doing it. And it's like, yeah, I don't think anybody can understand another individual or ever actually, like judge another person. And I'm really, as a human, as like me having a relationship with other people and understanding everybody, right? We can never understand another person until we're in their position. And to be judgmental of somebody for how they're living their life, or it just, and this is where I am now. It's just like I don't like, people can do whatever they want. Who am I to ever judge anybody, until I'm in that person's shoes and living their life and making the decisions that that person has to make. So I mean, it's totally beautiful. It really is.
My heart is just rejoicing listening to this bit. I mean, I've
Yeah.
been enjoying the whole lot, but like
Sure,
to me,
sure.
this is, I mean, I know it sounds maybe weird, but like to me, that's the best bit of this whole journey. You know what I mean? It's the best. It really is the best bit. In like, I don't remember who said this now, so I don't want to use the name in case I got it wrong.
Sure.
But there was almost someone described it so beautifully. It's almost like this reality is giving itself so fully to this human.
Yeah,
Then that's all it is, just being human, you know? So I'm still finalizing the book because there's so much new stuff coming up recently to do with like what my body does at the moment and the book is called Awakening to be Human. And it's such a bummer for many to even hear that, because this is to me the best bit, it's that you kind of start as human, you go through all of this, and then you end up kind of like, yes, different, but like not only human, but like more human than we've ever been.
Oh my goodness, it's crazy how human we
Yes.
become.
And to me, this is like the most beautiful, this is just the most beautiful. Oh, this is just my favorite bit, Gareth.
Yeah, it's like God writes the ultimate fairy tale for itself and then descends into a human so it can experience it like its heart been broken over and over and over again. The most beautiful joy and bliss and tears and all that kind of stuff. Like, and I'm going through that on a daily basis, right? And yet I still turn up. I still sit in front of people. I still do podcasts. I still, you know, pay the bills, do my accounts,
Yeah.
do all that kind of thing. And nobody has a clue what my human is going through. Like nobody. And would I do it again? I'd do it 1,000 times over. Um, yeah,
Same.
yeah, a
Yeah.
thousand times over.
Same, even though I must say that like you got a better treatment. You
Don't know about
got-
now at the moment, Maggie, though.
No, but I'm just saying like because I must say that like in compa I've always been very simple person, in the sense
Yeah,
that like I love simplicity. I've always loved simplicity. And even like when it comes to like people talking about awakening, like the more complicated the descriptions are, I'm like, goodbye.
me
My
too.
brain goes
It's very
goodbye,
difficult. Yeah,
you know? And I don't mean it in any disparaging way, by the way, because
sure.
there are some people that
That's not
literally
me.
have literally
Yeah,
have a gift of like seeing into the mechanics of every
I don't.
experience. And I find this beautiful, because it's almost like being like a spiritual engineer, or kind of like or something like that, that you just kind of can see these things that way, and that's their gift. I'm very different that way, like, even when I was in academia, I was doing my PhD, I was teaching. I was I think the reason why students liked me, it was because I was just speaking simply, and tried to make maybe some complex things as simple and especially as relatable as possible. And to me, that's the same with awakening. So like even when I see you, like when I hear you describe your journey, there's just so much like of this phenomenal nature that you experience. So much like, I think David Buckland how did he say it? Like, I was a space cowboy, because he has a lot of just like of these type of experiences. I haven't had much of that, and I still speak very simply about the stages, and I mean to the point that like I hear the descriptions of the stages, and I'm not even sure. I still don't know how to call certain shifts that I had, if that actually fits that frame. But I can tell you that I don't care. You know what I mean? Like it's just not something that, and I don't, I hope it doesn't sound arrogant, like I don't mean it
No.
in that way, but it's like, the only authority is the authority of my experience, and that's really just genuinely the only thing I can talk about. But how that's labeled according to whatever school of thought or tradition, like I really don't know. But can I ask you, now that you've been on this journey, and also having spoken to so many people, way more people than I have, how do you see the stages how do you look at the stages of awakening now? And also,
Mm.
especially something that I'm seeing a lot, because I see the value of knowledge about awakening. Okay. So I want to make it very clear that I'm absolutely not disparaging or dismissing the knowledge about various stages of awakening at all.
Yeah,
But what I'm seeing is just a lot of like rigid holding on to
yeah,
this knowledge,
yeah.
which I think is an kind of an obstacle, quote unquote, in of itself. So what's your take on that?
Yes. So it's like when you climb to the peak of the mountain, right? It's like everything that you've gone through to get there, like it's not important anymore. It's like did that even happen? Like the book I wrote, for instance, right? It's like did any of that even happen? Did I just make all of that up? That's what it feels like. Now I know
I
that's
know,
not
I
good for
hear
book
you.
sales, right? But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but that's what it feels like. And I kind of again I meet with so many people and they ask me all these questions and I understand for the individual
Mm-hmm.
they need to hear about it. They need to hear how it's, how that might look for them. But when you're talking about it, it's like there never was a stage. There was veils that were just covering what was always
Mm-hmm.
there anyway, right? It's like consciousness, the universe, like it just falls asleep, loses its memory of what it was, right? Its connection, its unityness, its all pervading knowledge, right? And it just dreams itself into creation, into the individual, and it sees itself as separate, right? And what spiritual awakening is the veils, that individual who's now veiled within creation, them veils one by one falling. And it's a remembering. It's like consciousness is sort of like somehow stepping back through the different stages, remembering itself before it fell asleep and became a human in matter, right? And that's what it is, right? I understand that the stages, they're signposts. It's a way that you and I can sit here and we can talk. We can both say, oh, at that stage, I experienced something, you had something
Yeah.
similar, but it's very different. We all have different body, mind, nervous
Yes.
systems. Like people have trauma in their systems that can have a sense of contractedness and stops awareness flowering fully, right? So there's a lot of work has to go on. Like I know what you said you went through the dark night of the soul. I felt that my dark night of the soul was my illness. But prior to awakening, I felt that that was somehow the universe processing a whole series of karma that I had accumulated in my early years. It was like, okay, we're going to speed up the whole process with the illness. And it just happens differently. Mine happened before my awakening. You went through your awakening and then it came up. So, yeah. And I think somewhere, little bits of everything is going on for everybody.
Yeah. To me, that's another. If there's anything that I hope that, like, at least my channel conveys through this conversation is just to show how different those journeys are. And honestly, Gareth, um, I have not met one person that would describe even the same shift the same way.
Of course.
It doesn't matter if it's like unity consciousness or God consciousness or whatever before, like genuinely, I've never heard anyone describe the same shift the same way. I've seen the stages happening in completely the upside
Yeah.
down to what I've heard, for example. I've seen, there will be, and I really want to say also like why it's it's good to learn and explore, but like not hold on to any of this because like I hear teachers, for example, talk about how the unity consciousness has to last for years. I found
Man,
it that not to be true at all,
couple
you
of weeks for
know?
me.
Exactly. And like, I had if again, I'm very, very simply, I had my first awakening that was 2010, I think,
Okay.
2010 or 2011. And then there was like just being fucked up most of the time for like, I'm joking, but it's like, it's been tough. It's been then like 3 years of equanimity, like I said, and kind of being here, there, nowhere, sort of not knowing who I was, where I was going, there
Yeah.
again, like in a nutshell. but basically then plunging back into suffering, getting out of it. So I would say several dark nights over a period of few years, and then literally a massive, what I used to call an emotional breakdown, which I now call a surrender, where like life literally surrendered me. That's what I call it. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
if you imagine the sense of self as a sort of like a dam, you know, like this massive dam. It was so now the way I see it now, it's like it's been crumbling since 2010, crumbling, 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 and then basically there was this like emotional breakdown where basically most of it has crumbled. So already then I had no sense of like personal volition, hardly any left, and I found myself just being pulled by this what I call like a current or a momentum,
Yeah.
not knowing where I was going, what was gonna happen, but like I
You just turn up,
couldn't
right?
give a shit. It was like there was no choice to like surrender to it. The surrendering was happening whether I liked it or not. You know what I mean? And so it was a ride that lasted, I would say, about a year, and I went through all the stages then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm just one of like multiple examples of that really you can my point is you can find multiple people defying their stories, defying any idea that you or anyone else the authority have on how this is supposed to play out.
Even though you use different language than I do, right? I can feel what you're talking about. Totally.
Yeah.
It's just like I'm like, yeah, totally. I totally get it, right? And I think that if anybody who's gone through a genuine abiding awakening, right? Like even if they use completely different language to talk about it, there's a truth in what they speak, and there's a truth in you that recognizes it, right? Whereas sometimes I hear people talking, and I'm like, that person is just talking from their intellect. They've just memorized
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they had some awakening, but like, it's like that doesn't feel genuine, what I'm hearing. But when you're talking to someone who's gone through a genuine, you can just sense what that person,
Yeah.
you just feel it. And that's why I think it really doesn't matter if what model or what map you use. Like, truth is truth, right? It's just we're just using different words, different language to describe it.
Mm.
Yeah. And we just kind of end up back on your sofa, maybe talking on a podcast like we are at the moment about it.
Yeah, but I can also relate to, when you said, like, what am I doing? I feel like an imposter, there was, in fact, that moment on that walk. I remember walking back and I was telling you that if you actually asked me what awakening was, even though I've been through all those shifts and I had a lot to say about awakening, believe me. Not that I ever consider myself authority of any kind, by the way, but like, I had a lot to say about awakening, before that. And then here I am walking home from that moment. And if you met me in the woods, which is where I walk, and you say, "Hey Maggie, can you like, so what's awakening? Can you talk to me about it?" I would just stare at you and I didn't even know what consciousness was.
Yeah.
I had no idea what consciousness was. I just knew that what was realized was like beyond consciousness and consciousnesses, but I had no idea how I knew that.
Yeah.
There's like no knowledge of spirituality, like, but it wasn't intellectual. It was just I knew, so I kind of laughed, because it's like, this is all fucking fabrication. This is, you know what I mean? Like, even including the things that I said and shared, even on YouTube
Yeah.
about awakening,
Yeah.
I was like, this is all fucking fabrication. I am never going to talk about it again. So I literally had like a moment of, um, I didn't, in fact, I would say I didn't want to talk about it to anybody ever, to what happened. I would be, I didn't want to talk. B, I wouldn't even know what to say because it felt like something happened, but nothing at all happened. It was a non-event. It was, you know, so I wouldn't even know what to tell. And I genuinely thought I will never talk about awakening to people because I was like, I will just add to another list of to the list of the
Yeah.
fabrications that are already there. And then a few months, like a year later, I'm finding myself writing a book. And you know what I mean? Like about which, but again, it felt like it was beside of me. It was almost like I had no plan to write a book. I have no freaking interest in writing a book about my journey of all things. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And but it's like it never let me give up. I've given up so many times on it, and it just wouldn't let me,
Yeah.
you know? And then I realized that like it's life living itself now, and if the and
Yes.
that includes those fabrications,
Sure.
and just because it's a fabrication doesn't mean that it's not useful, you know. And that, and like even the book, if you remember the book by Adyashanti, you know, the we talked about the end of your world. I mean, that's a fabrication in a way, you could say. And of course, I know that this word carries that like really negative kind of connotations, but actually, that book was just so like
It's useful, right?
it was so incredibly useful at the time, you
Yeah.
know. So when I say this, like, yes, it really does feel like nothing ever had like this whole story of someone just becoming enlightened or awakened, like, you know, just sort of collapse. But to me, at least in my experience, it does not mean being dismissive of that or saying,
Yeah.
oh, it doesn't matter or like whatever, you know, it's not about that at all because this is also this, the
Yeah.
way it appears, you know? I don't know. Would you wanna?
Yeah, yeah, totally. Because this is I'm totally going through this, and I would open up my Zoom to questions, and all of a sudden I was just like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not talking. I'm just sick of it. I'm just done talking about awakening. I was like, what do I know? I know nothing. I kind of got the metaphor of like toddlers talking to an adult about how did you become an adult? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm just an adult now. It just happened and I didn't do anything. And yet I'm tall and, you're asking me how I got to, it just happened and I didn't do anything. And I'm not special and I don't have a formula for it to happen. It just happened and I'm in an adult body now. So you totally get it. It's like who gave me the authority to sit here and talk about awakening, right? It's like how could I tell toddlers a formula on how to grow into an adult? It just happens. It just happens. It just naturally flowers, right, by itself. Um But yet, you just said it's life, living life just as it is. And I somehow feel that it needs individuals like you and I who are useful, right? It's like we are now its tools. It can use our form to maybe get the message out, right? Maybe to put the podcast to have something that we can reach other people to help awakening, right? However that looks. I run retreats. I from my business background, I'm organized. I'm not some, you know,
Yep.
individual who's like sitting on a sofa, totally blissed out, who doesn't want to do anything. I'm useful to the world. I can do things, and consciousness seems to want to use me. So I just do it, and yeah, I'm happy to do it, and yeah, happy to turn up and have great conversations like this, even though, 2 months ago I was like, I'm never talking to anyone again. I took all the podcasts off my YouTube down. I was just like, I'm done.
Really?
Yeah, I was just like, oh, me being guests on podcasts. I was like,
Oh, I
oh,
see. Right.
yeah. And I was like, I was still enjoying doing my podcast because I was listening to people's stories.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I
Mm-hmm.
just didn't want to talk about my story. I was just like, oh my God, what am I doing?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
I hear you.
yeah, it's just
Yeah.
another stage, right? It's just something working its
Yeah.
way through. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you because you've had this experience of being a teacher, and a lot of people probably see you as a teacher. So how do you feel now about that? And has anything changed around this? And is there anything that you actually find challenging at the moment because people look up to you?
Yeah. So this whole imposter syndrome thing kept coming up. People I get to travel and I get to meet people, and people really see the teacher as something special. They put them up on a pedestal, and I'm like, but that's not me. Like, I'm just totally normal. I like sitting, having a joke with everybody else. Please don't do that to me, right? It's almost like they sort of lock you into this character as well. And I don't want to be defined. I don't want to be defined by anything or anybody or any group. And um, yeah, somehow I continue to do what I do. I really don't see myself as a teacher. I really don't. I just very normal person. Yes, there's energies that become very organized around me and they're very useful for other people going through their awakening process. But like in terms of me, like sitting there and lecturing people and teaching people on a way, it's not me. I don't do it. I don't really, you know,
Hmm.
it's just not something that happens. Come and meditate, sit in the field, you know, that's useful. That seems to be what the universe wants me to do. And yeah, I get to be kind of in the background. I'm an introvert by nature. I don't like, being around lots of big groups and stuff. And yet the universe keeps pushing me into, you're the same. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's interesting because I mean, you have no idea how many things I picked up as you talk that we have in common, even starting from like childhood, feeling like I didn't know what the hell I was doing here from the start. And like
Yeah.
I didn't even feel at home with my family. Like I knew this was my family, but everybody, and I know that it kind of sounds cold, but it didn't feel cold. It's just like I didn't feel this kind of connection like people feel that in some way those were strangers with like roles
Me too.
assigned kind of
Totally.
a thing. So that was something that my rebellious boy was I a pain in the ass,
Me
like
too.
especially through like my
Yeah. Me
my
too.
teenage years. Oh boy, I mean, in many ways good. I actually have to say that part of the rebellion I now see as actually really good, because I was made to feel like I was black sheep because I was questioning teachers, I was questioning priests, I had
Me too.
million questions. I mean, I was asking, I was 14, I was telling you, I was 12 or 11 or something, and standing in a church and knowing that I was not hearing truth. I was hearing dogma, even though I didn't even know the word at the time. So then I would read the Bible and like make appointments with priests asking them questions because I was like, I'm seeing this like difference between what the Bible says and between what you're saying. So can you explain? And I mean, when I think about it, a 14, 15-year-old girl, like my friends had completely different concerns, and I was asking like these big questions, about the meaning of life. And you know what I recalled as I was working on my book? It's crazy. I always had older friends, and I had this friend, we called him the philosopher, and he must have been 4 years older than me, maybe, because he was just about to go off to university to study psychology. And I must have been telling him that I feel like a black sheep. I'm asking these questions. People see that teachers complain that I'm this troublemaker. Like I couldn't understand why I have to like memorize things. What has got to do with life? Why am I having to like study certain things? And he brought me this little book, handed it to me, and he said, "Read this." And you know what this book was? Anthony de Mello's Awakening. I don't know if you've ever heard about this book. This was a priest who left the church because he
Mm,
had an awakening, and
yeah.
basically, there was even a card at the end of this book. It was like printed in to say that the Catholic Church doesn't approve of this book. But I don't remember this book as a book about awakening at all. But I remember reading it and feeling energy of truth just rushing through. My heart was pounding. And I was just like, someone was questioning the same things that I was questioning about the church, but he was able to articulate it really well, and I didn't have the language. And it was and I remember just feeling so like almost nervous and like wanting to cry because all of a sudden I felt that actually my rebellion is not being a black sheep, it's actually curiosity,
Yeah.
and that it was okay to question authority. You know, it's almost like the book gave me like the permission to kind of made it okay. So these are some of the like the initial bits that you mentioned that we have in common, like big time.
Yeah, I think that rebellion is like your soul seeing through the illusion. It's like, okay, I'm here. What is this? Like, why do I have to do this? I was the very same in school. Why do I have to learn this stuff? I'm never going to use it again. Rebellion, like I would, like if my parents only found out this when they read my book, like, but I was like 14 and I would come home at curfew time and come in, say hi, and go into my room and jump out the window and wouldn't come back till 6 a.m. the next morning, And I
Oh
was
my
like
God.
running the streets like a delinquent with all my
Yeah,
friends. We all did it. And I had the best time ever. But it was just like I just didn't want to conform to society. I didn't want,
same.
I had a rebellion against everything, teachers, police, um, priests, all that kind of stuff. I just didn't want any part of it. And I know now that my soul was in dejection. It was like I had seen through everything in previous
Mm,
lives. I was shown my three previous lives going through the awakening, and I had awakened in the three lives prior to this one. And yeah, I had come in with something, this isn't it. What am I doing here? Who are these people? Who are my
yeah.
family? And I was the black sheep in my family as well. I had a sister who was Miss Ireland, and she got all the attention in the family, and I always felt like the outsider. And I was like, what am I
Same.
doing with these people? Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing with like the introvert bit, it's because if people don't know me, like they only see me like through maybe this podcast or just like the first kind of in social setting somewhere, then they definitely, I know for the fact that they see me as like extrovert because I talk a lot, I'm loud, I swear. Not no longer as a sailor, I must say. I don't swear as much as I used to, for some reason. But
you swore
what
twice on this podcast.
that's really good. That is really good. That came down way down, I would say. Um, but um, but then, well, people are really surprised that I'm total hermit. I love my alone time.
Same.
I need a lot of just being alone, basically. That's it. Silent, not talking to anybody, which
Yeah.
is probably why when I finally meet someone, he's like, "Bruh." And then when I meet someone where like I connect with, then there's like this energy of enthusiasm, and then it's like, you can't shut me up, which is not very useful for doing the interviews. Yeah.
Yeah. And I get the very same thing. People will go to me, "You're not an introvert. I've been on retreat with you. You're
Yep.
great with people and blah, blah, blah." And I
Yeah.
am. I can just
Yeah.
twist. I can flick a switch and I can be the host. I can entertain everybody, look after
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I'm back at home. I will put my head down. I will walk. If I see someone, I'll walk the opposite direction just so I don't have to make eye contact with them. I'm just a total loner. I could go the whole week without speaking to anybody.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah,
Same. Gareth, thank you so much. 'Cause I'm aware, I'm just aware of time because I think you need to get going.
I have something at 3. Yeah,
Yeah, it was great. I hope you're
it
gonna be
really was.
back, to be honest.
Sure.
And so we can explore maybe some other topics, if it comes up. But it was just so great to talk to you, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. And please share, as always, if anything resonated with you in the comments. And I'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.
Loved it, Maggie. Thank you so much.